Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Innocence Betrayed. Devin Russo gripped the steering wheel as he drove along the scenic coastal road, glancing occasionally at his daughter Millie in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were wide with excitement, her small fingers clutching the homemade card she'd spent all morning decorating. "Do you think Mommy will like the surprise, Daddy?" Millie asked, her voice bubbling with anticipation. "She's going to love it, sweetheart," Devin replied with a smile that masked the exhaustion of the past 3 months. At 42, Devin had built his security consulting firm from nothing into one of the most sought after in the region. Former military, with a background in tactical operations and intelligence, he had translated those skills into protecting high-value targets, mostly corporate executives and occasionally government officials. His company, Sentinel Security, had grown from a one-man operation to employing 35 specialists. The success had come at a cost, though. The past year had been particularly demanding, with contracts taking him overseas for weeks at a time. His marriage to Vanessa had suffered, their conversations becoming increasingly stilted and formal. When Vanessa's father, Howard Thornton, had fallen ill with congestive heart failure 3 months ago, she'd suggested moving temporarily to his countryside estate to care for him. Devin had agreed, thinking the space might actually help them both reflect on what they wanted. Now, as spring bloomed across the countryside, Devin had decided it was time to make amends. He'd cleared his schedule for 2 weeks, packed up Millie from school, and headed to surprise Vanessa at Howard's estate. Maybe this gesture would begin to heal whatever had fractured between them. Howard's estate appeared around the bend. A sprawling stone house surrounded by well-manicured gardens and a view of the distant ocean. Devin felt a pang of nervousness as he pulled up the long driveway and parked beside Vanessa's silver BMW. "Let's go super quiet, like ninjas," he whispered to Millie as they approached the front door. "That way, the surprise will be even better." Millie nodded solemnly, taking her role as co-conspirator seriously. As they reached the entrance, Devin noticed the heavy oak door was slightly ajar. Strange. Vanessa was always meticulous about security, a habit she'd picked up from him. Devin motioned for Millie to wait as he listened for voices. He could hear faint sounds coming from inside, but couldn't make out what they were. He was about to call out when Millie, impatient with waiting, slipped past him and peeked through the gap in the door. She turned back almost immediately, her expression confused. She gently tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, look, but don't shout," she whispered. Devin frowned and leaned forward to glance through the door. What he saw made his blood run cold. In the grand foyer of Howard's home, on the antique settee that had been in the Thornton family for generations, was his wife. Vanessa was wrapped in the arms of a man Devin recognized immediately, Blake Reynolds, Howard's physical therapist. Her blouse was undone, Blake's hands exploring places that made Devin's vision blur with rage. They were kissing passionately, completely lost in each other. In that moment, Devin felt something fundamental crack inside him. Not just his heart, but something deeper, his trust, his perception of his life, everything he thought he knew about his 15-year marriage. He stood frozen, one hand on Millie's shoulder, as 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. Every business trip where Vanessa had been distant on the phone. Every time she'd been too tired when he returned home. The growing coldness that he'd attributed to his work schedule. All of it suddenly made terrible sense. "Daddy," Millie tugged at his sleeve again, her voice small and confused. "Why is Mommy kissing that man?" The question snapped Devin back to reality. He couldn't let his daughter witness this. With remarkable self-control, he gently pulled Millie away from the door. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I think we should go back to the car for a minute. I forgot something important." As they walked back to the SUV, Devin's mind was already calculating, analyzing, planning, the tactical part of his brain taking over while his emotions threatened to overwhelm him. By the time he helped Millie into her seat, A cold clarity had settled over him. This wasn't just about Vanessa's betrayal. This was about who he was at his core. And Devin Russo was not a man who forgot or forgave. Chapter 2: Hidden Truths. Devin sat in his hotel room, staring at the laptop screen as he scrolled through the surveillance footage from the nanny cam he'd installed in Millie's teddy bear. He'd asked Mrs. Winters, their longtime housekeeper, to take Millie for ice cream while he sorted things out with Vanessa. The confrontation had been surprisingly cold. Devin had returned to the estate alone, walking in on Vanessa and Blake in the kitchen. They'd sprung apart, but it was far too late for pretense. "How long?" was all Devin had asked. Vanessa's face had drained of color. "Devin, I can explain." "I asked how long, Vanessa." Blake had tried to step forward, but one look from Devin had frozen him in place. There was something in Devin's eyes that warned of calculated violence barely contained. 8 months, Vanessa had finally whispered. 8 months. While Devin had been working himself to exhaustion to build their future, while he'd been sending her expensive gifts from overseas, while he'd been faithful despite plenty of opportunities not to be. Now, in the quiet of the hotel room, Devin rewound the footage again, watching the conversation that had followed his departure with Millie. Vanessa and Blake, thinking themselves alone, had spoken freely. "He knows," Vanessa said, pacing the foyer. "God, what are we going to do?" Blake ran his hands through his hair. "Maybe it's for the best. You've been talking about leaving him for months. Not like this. He was never supposed to find out until I had everything in place." Devin paused the video, his jaw clenching. In place. Those 3 words told him everything he needed to know about his wife's intentions. He continued the footage. "What about the plan?" Blake asked. "What about Howard's estate?" "I don't know," Vanessa hissed. "Devin's not an idiot. If he starts looking into things, he won't find anything if we're careful. The trust amendments are ironclad. Once Howard passes, everything transfers to you. Devin won't see a penny." Devin closed the laptop, a cold fury settling in his chest. So that was the game. Howard had always treated Devin like a son, had even mentioned changing his will to include both Vanessa and Devin as beneficiaries of his considerable estate. Apparently, Vanessa and her lover had other ideas. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "We need to talk. Please come back to the house." Devin didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out a notebook and began to write. Names, dates, connections, everything he knew about Blake Reynolds. As one of the top security consultants in the country, Devin had resources most people couldn't imagine, and he intended to use every single one of them. By morning, he had a preliminary dossier on Blake Reynolds. 38 years old, licensed physical therapist, divorced 3 years ago. No children. A gambling problem carefully hidden from his professional associates. 2 DUIs expunged from his record through connections Devin couldn't yet identify. But most interestingly, a pattern of relationships with wealthy female clients, or in this case, the daughter of a wealthy client. Devin's phone had continued, buzzing throughout the night. Texts and voicemails from Vanessa, alternating between apologetic and defensive. He ignored them all. Instead, he called Phil Sawyer, his oldest friend from their military days and now Sentinel Security's chief investigator. "I need everything on Blake Reynolds," Devin said when Phil answered. "And I need surveillance on Vanessa and Howard's estate. Discreet, but comprehensive. Trouble in paradise, boss?" Phil asked, immediately serious. "Paradise was an illusion," Devin replied flatly. "I'm going to need a full team on this, Phil. Off the books. Consider it done." "What about Millie?" Devin glanced at the adjoining room where his daughter slept peacefully, unaware that her world was crumbling. "I'm taking her home tomorrow. Vanessa can have her scheduled visitations for now." "And you?" Devin's expression hardened. "I'm going to find out exactly how deep this betrayal goes, and then I'm going to dismantle their entire plan, piece by piece." "Devin," Phil's voice was cautious. "I've known you 20 years. Don't do anything you can't come back from." But Devin was already mentally past the point of return. They made their choice, Phil. Now they'll live with the consequences. As he hung up, Devin stared out the window at the dawn breaking over the horizon. In tactical operations, there was a principle he'd lived by, Identify the objective, gather intelligence, formulate a strategy, execute with precision. It had kept him alive in war zones. Now, it would guide his vengeance. The objective was clear: justice, his brand of it. Chapter 3: The Architect of Vengeance. 3 weeks after discovering his wife's betrayal, Devin sat in his home office, surrounded by monitors displaying surveillance feeds, financial records, and background reports. Millie was asleep upstairs, having adjusted to the new routine with the resilience only children possess. As far as she knew, Mommy was taking care of Grandpa Howard while Daddy worked from home. The reality was far more calculated. Devin had filed for divorce immediately, citing irreconcilable differences rather than adultery. He didn't want to drag Millie through a messy public scandal, and more importantly, he didn't want Vanessa and Blake to know how much he actually knew about their scheme. "You're sure about this?" asked Nia Bennett, his divorce attorney, as she reviewed the generous settlement offer he drafted. Nia was a shark in the courtroom, but looked perpetually concerned when dealing with Devin, as if she sensed the dangerous undercurrents beneath his composed exterior. "Completely," Devin replied, signing the documents without hesitation. "Vanessa gets the vacation home in Lake Tahoe, her car, and a lump sum that's more than fair. All I want is primary custody of Millie in this house." "She'll be suspicious," Nia warned. "Most men in your position would be fighting for every penny." Devin's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not most men, Nia, and some things are worth more than money." What Nia didn't know, what no one except Phil knew, was that Devin's apparent generosity was the first move in a much larger game. The settlement would make Vanessa feel secure, even victorious. It would make her careless. After Nia left, Phil arrived with a thick folder containing the results of his investigation. "It's worse than we thought," Phil said, spreading photographs across Devin's desk. "They've been systematically isolating Howard from his friends and other family members. His nurse, Tara Wilson, is concerned but afraid to speak up because Blake got her the job." Devin examined a photo of Howard, looking frielier than he remembered. "Has Blake changed his medication?" "Possibly." Tara mentioned that Howard seems over-medicated at times. "We need to get samples to be sure." Devin nodded, his expression darkening. "What about the will changes?" "That's where it gets interesting." Phil pulled out a document. "Howard made changes 3 months ago, right when Vanessa moved in. But here's the thing. The lawyer who handled it, Preston Walsh, isn't Howard's regular attorney. He's an old friend of Blake's from college. So they brought in their own lawyer to manipulate a sick old man," Devin said, disgust evident in his voice. "It gets better. Walsh has been disbarred in 2 states for ethical violations. He's only practicing in this state because the disciplinary board hasn't caught up with him yet." Devin leaned back, processing this information. "What about Blake's financials?" "He's drowning in debt. Gambling, mostly. High-stakes poker games and private clubs. He owes money to some dangerous people." Phil hesitated. "There's also a pattern with his previous clients. 3 wealthy older men with attractive daughters or wives. In each case, he ended up intimately involved with the woman. And in each case, the older man's health deteriorated rapidly. He's done this before," Devin said softly, a cold fury building inside him. "Looks that way. But he's never been charged with anything. No proof." Devin stood, walking to the window that overlooked his carefully landscaped backyard. The swing set he'd built for Millie stood empty in the fading light. "Howard was like a father to me," he said quietly. "When my own father wanted nothing to do with me, Howard taught me to fish, to change a tire, to be a man of principle." He turned back to Phil. "And now they're killing him slowly for his money." Phil shifted uncomfortably. "What's the play here, Devin?" "We go to the police." "With what? Circumstantial evidence? Suspicions?" "No." Devin shook his head. "The system won't help Howard, and it certainly won't give me justice." "Then what?" Devin returned to his desk and opened his laptop. "We're going to beat them at their own game. First, we make sure Howard is protected. I want Tara reporting directly to us, and I want our own doctor making unannounced visits to check on him. Already arranged. Dr. Flores will be going by tomorrow as an old friend." "Good. Next, we need to get to Preston Walsh. Every corrupt lawyer has secrets they don't want exposed. Phil nodded. I'll find his weakness. Third, we need to understand exactly how deep Blake's gambling debts go, and to whom. You're thinking of buying his debt? Phil asked. Devin's smile was chilling. I'm thinking of becoming his worst nightmare. As Phil gathered the documents to leave, he paused at the door. Devin, I've followed you into firefights without question. But this is different. Are you sure this is what you want? There's still time to walk away, focus on Millie, build a new life. Devin looked up, his eyes hard as flint. They're not just stealing from Howard or betraying me. They're playing with Millie's future, with her grandfather's life. There's no walking away from that. After Phil left, Devin sat alone in his office, finalizing his plans. In the military, he learned that the most effective operations were those where the targets never saw the attack coming until it was too late. Vanessa and Blake thought they were dealing with a successful businessman processing a painful divorce. They had no idea they were dealing with a strategist who had orchestrated operations that toppled warlords. Devin pulled out a chessboard, setting up the pieces one by one. Each piece represented a part of his plan. The pawns, the knights, the bishops, all moving toward one inevitable conclusion. Checkmate. Chapter 4. Opening Gambit. 2 months after filing for divorce, Devin stood in the doorway of his kitchen, watching as Vanessa hugged Millie goodbye after their weekend visitation. The divorce had been finalized with record speed, thanks to Devin's generous terms and Vanessa's eagerness to move on. She had immediately moved in with Blake at a new condo purchased, Devin knew, with the settlement money. I'll see you next weekend, Princess, Vanessa said, kissing the top of Millie's head. Maybe we can go to that new water park you've been talking about. Millie nodded enthusiastically before running upstairs to unpack her overnight bag. Vanessa straightened, her expression shifting to one of cautious neutrality as she faced Devin. She had a good weekend. We took her to the Science Museum. That's good, Devin replied evenly. He'd maintained a strictly civil relationship with Vanessa, never betraying by word or gesture the depth of his plans. Vanessa hesitated, seeming to want to say more. In the past weeks, Devin had noticed a subtle shift in her demeanor, less triumphant, more uncertain. She called several times about matters that could have been handled by text, lingering on the phone as if searching for something in his voice. How's Howard doing? Devin asked, knowing exactly how Howard was doing thanks to his network of informants. Better, actually, Vanessa said, surprise evident in her tone. The new medication seems to be helping. He's more lucid, more energetic. Of course he was. Dr. Flores had identified several concerning interactions in Howard's previous medication regimen and had discreetly adjusted his care. Blake hadn't been deliberately overdosing Howard. That would be too obvious, but he'd been negligent in ways that kept the older man weak and dependent. I'm glad to hear it, Devin said sincerely. Please give my best. Vanessa nodded, then hesitated again. Devin, I know this isn't what you wanted, but I hope someday we can be more than just civil co-parents. Devin offered a non-committal smile. Tom will tell Vanessa. Drive safely. As soon as her car pulled away, Devin's pleasant expression vanished. He checked his watch and dialed Phil's number. Is everything in place? He asked without preamble. Right on schedule, Phil confirmed. Preston Walsh received the ethics complaint this morning. He's already called Blake 3 times, but Blake hasn't answered. And why would Blake be unavailable on this particular morning? Phil's smile was audible. Because he's currently at Paradise Casino, trying to win back the $20,000 he lost last night to our friend Diego. Diego Suarez was actually Michael Ferris, one of Sentinel's best operatives and a former poker professional. For the past month, he'd been befriending Blake at various gambling establishments, carefully cultivating the relationship before drawing him into increasingly high-stakes games. How much does Blake owe now? Devin asked. With last night's losses, he's into Diego for $55,000. His credit cards are maxed out, and he's already borrowed against that new condo. Devin nodded in satisfaction. Phase 1 was proceeding exactly as planned. Blake's gambling addiction had made him the perfect target for financial pressure. Meanwhile, Preston Walsh was facing an ethics investigation that threatened his legal career an investigation anonymously filed with detailed evidence of his past ethical violations. "What about our other friend?" Devin asked. "Leo Donati is getting impatient," Phil reported. "Blake owes his organization over $100,000, and they've moved his debt into the collection category." Leo Donati was the owner of several legitimate businesses in the city, but he also controlled a substantial illegal gambling operation. Blake had been avoiding Donati's collectors for weeks, not knowing that Devin had recently provided valuable security consulting to Donati's legitimate businesses, creating a relationship that had proved useful in monitoring Blake's growing debt. "Keep me updated on Walsh," Devin instructed. "I want to know the minute Blake contacts him." The first pressure points were being applied. Blake's financial situation was deteriorating rapidly, and his legal accomplice was facing professional ruin. Soon, they would both be desperate enough to make mistakes. Later that evening, as Devin helped Millie with her homework, his secure phone buzzed with a message from Tara Wilson, Howard's nurse. "Mr. Thornton asking for you. Says it's important. Blake and Vanessa out for the evening." Devin arranged for Mrs. Winters to stay with Millie and drove immediately to Howard's estate. He found the older man sitting in his study, looking stronger than Devin had expected, but still far from his former robust self. "Devin, my boy." Howard greeted him with genuine warmth. "Thank you for coming." Devin embraced him carefully. "Of course, Howard. Tara said you wanted to see me." Howard gestured to the chair across from him. Straight to the point, as always. "Yes, I need to speak with you about something important." He glanced toward the door to ensure they were alone. "I believe something untoward is happening with my affairs." Devin kept his expression neutral, despite the surge of satisfaction he felt. Howard's natural intelligence and perception were reasserting themselves as his health improved. "What makes you think that?" Devin asked carefully. "Documents I don't remember signing. A lawyer I've never used before. And Blake." Howard's eyes narrowed. "He thinks I don't notice how he changes when Vanessa isn't around. Colder. Impatient. Have you confronted them?" Howard shook his head. "I'm not a fool, Devin. I wanted to understand the situation fully before making any moves." He studied Devin intently. "The thing I can't figure out is you. Vanessa says the divorce was amicable, that you were more than fair. But I know how much you loved her." Devin met the older man's gaze steadily. "I did love her, but that doesn't mean I can't recognize when it's time to change strategies." A slow, knowing smile spread across Howard's face. "You always were the smartest person in any room, son. Too smart to just walk away without a fight." He leaned forward. "Whatever you're planning, I want in." For the first time in months, Devin allowed himself a genuine smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." Chapter 5, Pressure Points. Devin watched through binoculars from his parked SUV as Blake Reynolds paced nervously outside the upscale restaurant. The coastal wind tousled Blake's carefully styled hair, and even from this distance, Devin could see the tension in his posture. Blake checked his watch repeatedly, his anxiety visibly mounting with each passing minute. He was waiting for Preston Walsh, who would never arrive, because Walsh was currently in a meeting with the State Bar's Ethics Committee, fighting for his professional life. Finally, Blake's phone rang. From the way his shoulders slumped, Devin knew Walsh was delivering bad news. The conversation was brief. Blake shoved the phone in his pocket and stalked to his car, punching the steering wheel before driving away. Devin started his own vehicle and followed at a distance, though he already knew where Blake was headed. According to the tracker Devin had placed on his car, Blake had been visiting the same pawn shop repeatedly over the past week. Sure enough, Blake pulled up outside Golden State Pawn. Devin parked across the street and watched as Blake emerged 15 minutes later, looking even more defeated. Whatever he'd brought to sell clearly hadn't yielded the sum he'd hoped for. Devin's phone buzzed with a text from Phil. Walsh cracked. "Gave us everything on the changes. It's worse than we thought." Another piece falling into place. Devin started his car and drove to Sentinel's offices, where Phil was waiting with Preston Walsh's sworn statement. The document detailed how Blake had pressured Walsh to create fraudulent amendments to Howard's will, using documents with forged signatures. According to Walsh, Blake had initially presented it as helping Howard streamline his estate planning, but it had become clear that Howard was not fully aware of the changes being made. This is enough to invalidate the changes, Nia Bennett said, reviewing the statement. Devin had brought her into his confidence once he had concrete evidence of illegal activity. But it's not enough to bring criminal charges that would stick. Criminal charges aren't my primary concern, Devin replied, examining the detailed timeline Walsh had provided. But this does give U.S. leverage. Nia raised an eyebrow. What exactly is your endgame here, Devin? Reclaiming your share of Howard's estate. This was never about money. Devin's voice was quiet but intense. This is about accountability and ensuring that Howard's final years are peaceful and dignified. Phil cleared his throat. There's something else you should know. Blake missed another payment to Donati. His collector has been making house calls. Devin nodded. The pressure was building exactly as he'd planned. Blake was being squeezed financially from multiple directions. His gambling debts to both Diego and Donati, the money he'd spent on the condo and lavish gifts for Vanessa, and now the impending collapse of the Will scheme. It's time for the next phase, Devin decided. Phil, arrange a meeting with Donati. Nia, prepare the paperwork for Howard to revoke all prior amendments to his will. And I think it's time I had a conversation with my ex-wife. The following evening, Devin sat across from Vanessa at an upscale restaurant downtown. She'd been surprised by his invitation, but had accepted immediately, too quickly for someone supposedly happily settled with her new partner. You look well, she said, studying him over her wine glass. The divorce seems to agree with you. Devin offered a measured smile. I found clarity helps with many things. Clarity, Vanessa repeated, a hint of bitterness in her tone. Is that what you call moving on so easily after 15 years of marriage? I wouldn't call it easy, Devin replied calmly, but necessary. He took a sip of water, letting the moment stretch. How's Blake handling the pressure? The question caught her off guard. Pressure? Financial pressure, primarily. The new condo, the luxury car he leased last month. It must be difficult to maintain on a physical therapist's salary. Vanessa's expression shuddered. I don't see how that's any of your business. Probably not, Devin conceded. Just as Howard's will isn't any of Blake's business. Or Preston Walsh's. The color drained from Vanessa's face. What are you talking about? Devin leaned forward slightly. I'm talking about fraudulent amendments to a sick man's will. I'm talking about document forgery and elder abuse. Serious criminal charges, Vanessa. You can't prove anything, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Preston Walsh disagrees. He's been very cooperative with the State Bar's Ethics Committee. And with me. Vanessa's hands trembled slightly as she set down her glass. Why are you telling me this? What do you want? I want you to understand your situation clearly, Devin said, his voice soft but implacable. Blake is drowning in gambling debt. The Will scheme is unraveling, and you're caught in the middle of a mess that could end with both of you facing criminal charges. Unless you make different choices. Devin slid a folder across the table. Inside is documentation of everything I've just told you, along with a new custody arrangement for Millie. I want full custody, with you having supervised visitation until you've established a stable living situation separate from Blake. Vanessa opened the folder, scanning the documents with growing horror. You can't do this to me. I'm her mother. A mother who was willing to participate in defrauding her own father, Devin countered, his voice hardening for the first time. The courts take a dim view of that kind of character. Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes. I never wanted to hurt Howard. Blake said we were just simplifying things, making sure there wouldn't be estate complications. It wasn't until later that I realized that you were involved in something illegal. Devin finished for her. That Blake has done this before. Her head snapped up. What? This isn't his first time, Vanessa. There have been others, older men with assets, vulnerable family members. Blake finds a way in, gains trust, then systematically loots the estate. The shock on her face was genuine. For a moment, Devin almost pitied her. He said he loved me, she whispered. Maybe he does, Devin replied, though he didn't believe it for a second. But love doesn't stop debt collectors or criminal charges. He stood, placing a business card on the table. That's my lawyer's number. Call her when you're ready to discuss the custody arrangement. And Vanessa? I'd make that decision soon. Things are going to get much worse for Blake in the very near future. As he walked away, Devin felt no satisfaction, no vindication, only a cold certainty that justice was finally in motion. Chapter 6. Walls Closing In. Blake Reynolds pounded on the door of Devin's house, his face contorted with rage. It was just past midnight, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the commotion Blake was creating. Devin opened the door calmly, looking unsurprised by the late-night visitor. "Lower your voice, Blake. My daughter is sleeping." "You son of a bitch," Blake hissed, stepping forward menacingly. "You think you can threaten Vanessa? Turn her against me?" Devin didn't budge, his posture relaxed but alert. "I didn't threaten anyone. I simply provided information." His eyes flicked to Blake's bruised knuckles. "Looks like Donati's collectors found you." Blake's eyes widened slightly. "You're behind that too? How did you even know about Donati?" "I make it my business to know things," Devin replied. "Just like I know about the forged amendments to Howard's will, and your previous ventures with similar vulnerable families." Blake's rage faltered, replaced by calculating wariness. "What's your angle here? You want money? A piece of Howard's estate?" Devin almost laughed at the predictability. A man like Blake, motivated purely by greed, couldn't conceive of motivations beyond financial gain. "I want justice," Devin said simply. "For Howard. For my daughter. Even for Vanessa, though she made her own choices." "Justice," Blake spat. "You self-righteous prick. You think you're so much better than me? At least I'm honest about what I want." "And what exactly do you want, Blake? Besides money you didn't earn and a woman you manipulated?" Blake's face twisted with contempt. "I want what everyone wants: security, power, respect. The difference is I don't pretend there are rules or morals that matter. It's all a game, and I play to win." "So do I," Devin said softly. "The difference is I've been playing this particular game a lot longer than you have, and I'm several moves ahead." Blake lunged forward suddenly, his fist aimed at Devin's face. With practiced ease, Devin sidestepped, caught Blake's wrist, and used his momentum to slam him face first into the doorframe. In one fluid motion, Devin twisted Blake's arm behind his back, applying just enough pressure to cause significant pain without breaking anything. "That was a mistake," Devin said calmly into Blake's ear as he struggled uselessly. "One of many you've made recently. Here's what happens next. You're going to leave my property and never return. You're going to stay away from my daughter. And tomorrow, you're going to encourage Vanessa to accept the custody arrangement I've proposed." "Or what?" Blake gasped through the pain. Devin increased the pressure slightly, causing Blake to groan. "Or I'll make sure Leo Donati knows exactly where to find you. I understand his collection methods become quite creative after multiple mispayments." He released Blake suddenly, stepping back as the younger man stumbled and nearly fell. "This isn't over," Blake snarled, rubbing his shoulder. "You're right about that," Devin agreed. "But it will be soon." After Blake left, Devin checked on Millie, relieved to find her still sleeping peacefully. Then he called Phil. "Blake paid me a visit," he reported. "He's getting desperate." "That tracks with what our sources say," Phil replied. "Donati's people roughed him up today, and he got until Friday to pay at least half of what he owes." "Has he approached Howard for money?" "Tried to, but Howard shut him down. Told him he was reviewing all his financial arrangements and wouldn't be making any disbursements until that review was complete." Devin smiled grimly. Howard was playing his part perfectly. And Vanessa? She's been making calls to her father's original attorney, to a women's shelter, and to a friend in Portland. "Looks like she might be planning an exit strategy." "Good," Devin said. "Keep eyes on Blake. I want to know every move he makes." The next morning, Devin received a call from Nia Bennett. "Vanessa's agreed to the custody arrangement," she reported, sounding surprised. "No pushback, no negotiations. She's signing everything as is." "Thank you, Nia. Please process it immediately." "Devin." Nia hesitated. She sounded frightened. "Not of you, but..." She asked if I could recommend personal security. Said she was concerned about potential volatility in her home situation. So Vanessa was finally seeing Blake clearly. "Give her whatever resources she needs," Devin instructed, "and let her know she can contact me directly if she feels unsafe." Later that day, Howard called. "Blake's getting erratic," the older man reported. "Demanding money, making veiled threats." Vanessa's packed a bag and gone to a hotel. Are you safe? Devin asked immediately. Tara and your security man are here. I'm fine. Howard paused. She's my daughter, Devin. Despite everything, I don't want her hurt. She won't be, Devin assured him. I've already arranged protection for her. This will all be over soon. That evening, as Devin reviewed the latest surveillance reports in his office, his secure phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously. Devin. Vanessa's voice was tight with fear. I need help. Blake found me at the hotel. He's not the person I thought he was. Are you safe right now? Devin asked, already grabbing his keys. Yes, I locked myself in the bathroom. He's outside, demanding I come out. He says he knows I've been talking to you, that I've betrayed him. Text me your hotel and room number, Devin instructed. I'll be there in 20 minutes. My team will be there in 10. Don't engage with him, just stay locked in and wait. As soon as he had her location, Devin dispatched Phil and 2 other Sentinel operatives to the hotel. Then he called Leo Donati directly. Mr. Donati, this is Devin Russo. I believe I've located someone who owes you a substantial sum. Donati's gravelly voice was cautious but interested. Is that so? And why would you share this information with me? Let's just say we have a mutual interest in settling accounts with this particular individual. After giving Donati Blake's location, Devin headed to the hotel himself. By the time he arrived, Phil had already secured Vanessa and moved her to a different room. Blake was nowhere to be found. He took off when hotel security showed up, Phil explained. But I'm guessing he won't get far. Devin nodded. How's Vanessa? Shaken. Seems like she's finally seeing the full picture. Devin found Vanessa sitting on the edge of the bed in the new room, her eyes red from crying, but her posture resolute. Thank you for coming, she said quietly as he entered. Devin sat in the chair across from her. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Not physically. She took a deep breath. I've been so stupid, Devin. So blind. We see what we want to see sometimes, he replied, not unkindly. I signed the custody papers, Vanessa said, meeting his eyes. You're right. Millie needs stability right now. And I need to fix things. With my life. With my father. She paused. With you, eventually, though I know that's asking a lot. Devin studied her, searching for manipulation or deception, but found only exhausted clarity. What will you do now, he asked. My friend in Portland has offered me a place to stay. A fresh start, away from Blake. Away from all of this. She hesitated. I know I don't deserve any favors, but I was hoping you might help me get there safely. It wasn't part of Devin's original plan, but he nodded. I'll arrange it. On one condition, you tell Howard everything. The complete truth about the will, about Blake's plan. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. I will. He deserves that much. As Devin left the hotel, having arranged for Vanessa to be safely escorted to a new secured location, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It contained only a photo, Blake Reynolds, bloodied and terrified, kneeling in what appeared to be a warehouse, with the shadowy figure of Leo Donati standing beside him. The game was entering its final phase. Chapter 7, Judgment Day. 5 days after the hotel incident, Devin sat in Howard Thornton's study, watching as the older man signed the final document invalidating all changes to his will made during the past year. Howard's original attorney, Theodore Monroe, witnessed the signature along with 2 notaries. There, Howard said, setting down the pen with finality. Back to the way it should be. He looked up at Devin. With one addition, I've made sure Millie is provided for directly, in a trust that can't be touched by anyone but her when she comes of age. Devin's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. Howard, you didn't have to do that. Of course I did, the older man replied firmly. She's my granddaughter, and blood means something. Unlike some people in this family, I honor my commitments. After Monroe and the notaries left, Howard poured 2 glasses of his prized scotch. Any word on Blake's whereabouts? Devin accepted the glass. He's no longer a concern. Howard raised an eyebrow. Should I ask for details? Better not to, Devin advised. Let's just say his debts have been settled in a manner appropriate to his character. The truth was more complex. After his encounter with Donati, Blake had disappeared. Rumor had it he'd been given a choice. work off his debt through certain unsavory activities, or face consequences far worse than a beating. Either way, he had left the state and showed no signs of returning. And Vanessa? Howard asked, his voice softening. She called this morning. Sounded different, more like her old self. She's staying with a friend in Portland, Devin confirmed. Starting therapy, looking for work. She wants to make amends. Howard studied Devin over the rim of his glass. And how do you feel about that? Devin considered the question carefully. I believe in accountability. She's taking responsibility for her actions, facing consequences. That's appropriate. But forgiveness? Howard pressed. Devin shook his head. That's not something I'm ready to consider. Howard nodded, understanding in his eyes. For what it's worth, I think you handled this whole mess with remarkable restraint. Most men would have scorched the earth. I considered it, Devin admitted. But vengeance without purpose is just destruction. This way, justice is served, Howard is protected, and Millie doesn't lose her mother entirely. Speaking of Millie, Howard said, I'd like to see more of her, now that I'm feeling stronger. Perhaps you both could come for dinner next weekend? We'd like that, Devin replied with a genuine smile. Later that evening, as Devin drove home, Phil called with an update. Blake surfaced briefly in Reno. Seems Donati has him working his muscle for one of his casino operations there. Appropriate, Devin commented. From predator to enforcer. There's something else. Preston Walsh was officially disbarred this morning, and the DEA is reviewing evidence of his involvement in multiple cases of elder abuse and fraud. Good. Make sure Howard's case is at the top of that pile. I want Walsh to face full consequences. After hanging up, Devin found himself reflecting on the past months. The betrayal had nearly destroyed him, had threatened everything he valued, his family, his integrity, his connection to Howard. But instead of breaking him, it had revealed strengths he hadn't fully recognized in himself. The ability to plan methodically, to execute justice with precision rather than emotion, to protect what mattered without descending into mere revenge. When he arrived home, Millie was waiting, excited to show him the science project she'd been working on with Mrs. Winters. As he listened to her enthusiastic explanation of photosynthesis, Devin felt a profound sense of rightness. This moment, this child, this future was what he'd been fighting for. Later, after Millie was asleep, Devin received a text from Vanessa. Thank you for arranging the security detail. Starting therapy tomorrow. We'll call Millie this weekend as agreed. He didn't respond immediately. Part of him, a significant part, still burned with anger at her betrayal. But another part recognized that her downfall had been engineered precisely as he'd intended. She had been manipulated by Blake, yes, but she'd also been systematically isolated and pressured by Devin's carefully orchestrated campaign. Finally, he texted back a simple acknowledgement. Security will remain in place as needed. Good luck with therapy. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was an acknowledgement that the justice he'd sought had been achieved. Blake was effectively exiled, facing a future of servitude to Donati. Walsh was professionally ruined and facing criminal charges. Vanessa had lost her marriage, primary custody of her child, and the comfortable future she'd schemed for. Most importantly, Howard was safe, his estate secure, and Millie protected from the fallout as much as possible. As Devin prepared for bed, his secure phone rang again. This time, it was Leo Donati. Mr. Russo, the crime boss, greeted him. I wanted to thank you personally for the gift you provided. Mr. Reynolds is proving quite useful in my Reno operation. I'm glad it worked out for both of us, Devin replied carefully. Indeed. In fact, I find myself impressed with your methodology. Cold, precise, effective. We should discuss potential future collaborations. Devin considered the offer. His security firm operated firmly within legal boundaries, but having Donati as an occasional information source could be valuable. I'd be open to discussions, he said finally, within certain parameters. Of course, Donati agreed smoothly. A man of your principles has boundaries. I respect that. He paused. One last thing, Reynolds has been asking about you. Seems to think you'll eventually lose interest, and he can return to his old life. What did you tell him? Donati chuckled. I told him what I've observed about you, Mr. Russo. that you're not a man who forgets or forgives. After ending the call, Devin stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood. Donati had read him correctly. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. Some debts could never be repaid. Justice had been served, but the scars would remain, a permanent reminder of the price of betrayal. Chapter 8. Phoenix Rising. 6 months after the confrontation at the hotel, Devin stood in the reception hall of Sentinel Security's new headquarters, watching with quiet pride as employees and clients mingled at the grand opening celebration. The expansion had been his focus for the past few months, channeling his energy into growing the business rather than dwelling on the past. Quite an achievement, Howard commented, joining him with a glass of champagne. The older man looked remarkably recovered, his color good, his posture stronger, his eyes clear and sharp. From a one-man operation to this in just 8 years. Devin smiled. With considerable help from investors like you. Howard waved this away. My investment was purely self-interested. I recognized potential when I saw it. He nodded toward Millie, who was charming a group of executives with her precocious questions about security systems. Speaking of potential, that one's going to run the world someday. God help us all, Devin agreed fondly. The event marked more than just a business expansion. It represented Devin's emergence from the dark period following his divorce, his Phoenix moment, rising from the ashes of betrayal to create something stronger and more formidable than before. Sentinel had diversified into new security sectors, had doubled its staff, and had secured contracts with 3 international corporations. Devin had transformed his personal pain into professional drive, channeling the tactical precision he'd used against Blake and Vanessa into business strategy instead. Have you heard from her recently? Howard asked carefully. Devin knew he meant Vanessa. She calls Millie twice a week as scheduled. We keep our interactions brief and focused on co-parenting. He hesitated. She seems to be doing better, working steadily, continuing therapy. She's asked to visit, Howard said. I'm considering it. Devin nodded, unsurprised. Despite everything, Howard loved his daughter. That's between you and her. And you're truly all right with that? With her potentially re-entering our lives in some capacity. I've made my peace with certain realities, Devin replied evenly. Vanessa will always be Millie's mother. You'll always be her father. Those connections remain, regardless of my personal feelings. What he didn't need to say to Howard, who knew him so well, was that peace was not forgiveness. Devin had accepted the situation, had moved forward with his life, but the breach of trust remained unhealed and, in his mind, unhealable. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and Millie had been picked up by Mrs. Winters for a sleepover, Devin returned to his office to find Phil waiting with an unmarked folder. Quarterly update, Phil said, sliding it across the desk. Thought you'd want to see it right away. Inside was the regular intelligence report Devin still maintained on the key players from his personal drama. Blake remained in Reno, working for Donati's organization, a gilded cage that was gradually becoming more caged than gilded as his usefulness plateaued. Preston Walsh had pled guilty to multiple charges of fraud and elder abuse, receiving a 10-year sentence that effectively ended his legal career forever. And Vanessa had indeed built a new life in Portland. A modest apartment, a job teaching at a private school, regular therapy sessions. According to the report, she had declined alimony in the most recent review, stating she preferred to support herself. She had also begun volunteering at a domestic violence shelter, counseling women who had been manipulated by predatory partners. She's trying to atone, Phil observed, watching Devin's face for a reaction. So it seems, Devin acknowledged neutrally. Does that change anything for you? Devin closed the folder deliberately. No. Phil nodded, unsurprised. In all the years he'd known Devin, he'd never seen him reverse a judgment once it was made. Devin's moral code was rigid but consistent. Loyalty was paramount, betrayal unforgivable. There's one more thing, Phil said. We've been approached by a government agency regarding a security consultation. High-level classified. They specifically requested you. Devin raised an eyebrow. Which agency? They wouldn't say over the phone. But the contact name is one I recognize from your military days. Hammond. General William Hammond had been Devon's commanding officer during his most classified operations. If Hammond was reaching out, it was significant. Set up the meeting, Devon decided. And Phil? Keep the regular surveillance in place. All of them. After Phil left, Devon stood at his office window, looking out at the city lights. The past 6 months had been about rebuilding his business, his relationship with Millie, his sense of purpose. He had succeeded on all fronts, transforming potential destruction into new strength. Yet beneath the surface, unchanged and unchanging, remained his core principle. Never again would he trust those who had proven themselves untrustworthy. Never again would he lower his guard for those who had once betrayed him. It wasn't bitterness that drove this resolve, but clarity. A clear-eyed recognition that some bridges, once burned, should not be rebuilt. Not because the ruins couldn't be salvaged, but because the crossing wasn't worth the risk. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. They're asking questions about Portland. About the woman. Should we be concerned? Donati's cryptic warning. Someone was making inquiries about Vanessa. Inquiries substantial enough to reach Donati's extensive information network. Devon texted back, monitor only. No action. Whoever was investigating Vanessa would find nothing connecting her to Devon's orchestrated downfall of Blake Reynolds. He had been too careful, too methodical for that. The only potential link, Leo Donati himself, had as much reason to maintain secrecy as Devon did. Still, the message was a reminder that vigilance was never wasted. The past could resurface in unexpected ways, and Devon intended to be prepared. As he left the office, he felt a sense of completion. The chapter involving Vanessa and Blake was effectively closed. Justice had been served, consequences delivered. Whatever came next, government contracts, business expansion, Millie's future, would be built on the solid foundation of lessons learned. Never trust blindly. Never forget betrayal. And never, ever leave an enemy with the capacity to strike again. Chapter 9. Unforgiving. 2 years to the day after discovering Vanessa's betrayal, Devon stood on the balcony of his new home, overlooking the ocean. The house, a modernist structure of glass and steel perched on a cliff, represented his final break with the past. He had sold the family home 6 months earlier, unable to fully shed the memories it contained despite renovations and redecorating. Millie, now 8, had adapted to the change with characteristic resilience. She loved the private beach access and the specially designed studio space Devon had created for her budding interest in science and art. Currently, she was at a weekend STEM camp, thriving among other gifted children. "Quite a view," remarked General Hammond, joining him on the balcony with a tumbler of whiskey. "Worth every penny, I'd imagine." Devon nodded. The two men had developed a close working relationship over the past year and a half, with Sentinel providing specialized security consulting for several classified government operations. Hammond had become something of a mentor again, as he had been during Devon's military service. "I appreciate you making the trip out here," Devon said. The project files could have been delivered electronically. Hammond shrugged. "Some information is better discussed face to face." He took a sip of his drink, his expression becoming serious. "There's a complication with the Jakarta operation, one I thought you should be aware of personally." "What kind of complication?" "A personnel issue. One of the diplomatic staff assigned to the protection detail has a connection to you." Hammond slid a dossier across the table between them. "Vanessa Thornton, recently hired by the State Department as an educational liaison for diplomatic families overseas. Her first assignment is Jakarta, starting next month." Devon stared at the file, his expression unreadable. "That's unexpected. I thought you might say that." Hammond studied him carefully. "The question is whether this presents a security concern. Given your history." Devon opened the file, scanning its contents methodically. The photograph showed Vanessa looking professional and composed, her expression more serious than he remembered. According to the dossier, she had excelled in her teaching position in Portland, had completed a master's degree in international education, and had received strong recommendations for the State Department position. There was no mention of her past actions regarding Howard's estate. No indication of her connection to Blake Reynolds or Preston Walsh. Somehow, She had managed to rebuild her life without the shadow of those events following her professionally. Does she know I'm connected to the Jakarta security operation? Devin asked. Hammond shook his head. Sentinel's involvement is classified. She's unlikely to discover it unless you choose to reveal it. Devin closed the file. Then there's no security concern from my perspective. We'll proceed as planned. Hammond nodded, but his expression remained searching. And if your paths cross during the deployment, it's a relatively small diplomatic community. We'll interact professionally, Devin stated flatly. Our personal history is irrelevant to the operation. Later, after Hammond had departed, Devin returned to the balcony alone. The coincidence, if it was one, of Vanessa being assigned to the same diplomatic mission he was helping secure felt like the universe testing his resolve. 2 years of deliberate separation, of careful compartmentalization, potentially undone by a random State Department assignment. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Phil, monthly surveillance update on Reynolds. Situation changed. Call when you can. Devin dialed immediately. What's happened? Blake's gone, Phil reported. Disappeared from Reno 3 days ago. Donati's people are looking for him, but they've found nothing so far. Devin frowned. Any indication where he was headed? Nothing concrete, but there's something interesting. About a week ago, he received a visitor at the casino, a man from Portland. Portland, where Vanessa had been living, where she had built her new life, earned her master's degree, secured her State Department position. Give me everything on the visitor, Devin instructed, and increase surveillance on Vanessa. I want to know everyone she's been in contact with in the past month. After ending the call, Devin stood motionless, staring out at the darkening ocean. The timing was too neat to be coincidental. Vanessa's new assignment, Blake's disappearance. Something was happening, some plan unfolding that he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in 2 years, Devin felt the cold clarity of tactical thinking overtake him again. The feeling was familiar, almost comforting, the sharpening of focus, the heightened awareness of potential threats and countermeasures. If Vanessa and Blake were reconnecting, if they were planning something together, perhaps revenge for Devin's systematic dismantling of their lives, then he needed to be prepared. Needed to be 3 steps ahead, as he had been before. The next morning, Devin called Howard. I need to ask you something, and I need absolute honesty. Of course, Howard replied, sounding concerned. What's wrong? Have you been in contact with Vanessa recently? Has she mentioned her new job? Or Blake? Howard hesitated just long enough to confirm Devin's suspicion. She visited last month. Told me about the State Department position. She was very excited about it. And Blake? Did she mention him at all? Not directly, no. Howard's tone was careful, but she did ask if I'd heard anything about him. I told her I hadn't. Did she say why she was asking? Another hesitation. No, but she seemed, I don't know, concerned. Not romantic concern, more like worry. As if she was afraid of something. Devin absorbed this information silently. If Vanessa was afraid of Blake, that suggested she wasn't willingly reconnecting with him. But if not, why would Blake suddenly disappear just as Vanessa was preparing for an overseas assignment? Devin, Howard said quietly, I know you've never forgiven her, and I respect your reasons. But I've spent time with her over the past year, and I believe she's genuinely changed. Whatever's happening now, I don't think she's trying to hurt you. I appreciate your perspective, Devin replied neutrally. But I learned a long time ago to trust patterns over promises. After ending the call, Devin made another to Leo Donati. Mr. Russo, Donati greeted him, sounding genuinely pleased. It's been some time. I understand you're looking for Blake Reynolds, Devin said without preamble. News travels fast. Donati's tone hardened. Yes, Mr. Reynolds has made the unfortunate decision to terminate our arrangement without proper notice. My associates are quite eager to discuss this breach of etiquette with him. I have reason to believe he may be pursuing a personal vendetta against mutual acquaintances, Devin explained carefully. I'd appreciate being informed if you locate him. A mutual exchange of information, then. I find him, I tell you. You find him. I'll ensure he's available for your discussion, Devin completed. For the next 2 weeks, Devin intensified his preparation for the Jakarta operation while simultaneously directing resources toward locating Blake. The evidence was mounting that Blake had left Reno deliberately, with planning and outside help. He had liquidated several small assets, had obtained false identification, and had been seen near the Canadian border. Most concerning of all, Phil's team had uncovered communications between Blake and a former associate of Preston Walsh, a disbarred lawyer with connections to several identity fraud operations. Then, 3 days before Devin was scheduled to fly to Jakarta for the security setup, Phil called with news. "We found him," Phil reported. "Blake's in Bangkok. Has been for the past week, staying at a mid-range hotel under the name Brian Reed. And Devin? He's booked on a flight to Jakarta that arrives 1 day after Vanessa's scheduled arrival." The pattern was clear now. Blake had engineered his escape from Donati's organization and was heading to Jakarta, where Vanessa would be starting her new position. Whether she was aware of his plans or not remained uncertain, but the threat was undeniable. "Change of plans," Devin told Phil. "I'm going to Bangkok tonight. I need a team ready when I arrive, and I need you to handle the initial Jakarta setup without me." "What exactly are you planning to do when you find Blake?" Phil asked cautiously. Devin's voice was cold and precise. "Finish what should have been finished 2 years ago." 24 hours later, Devin sat in a nondescript vehicle outside Blake Reynolds' Bangkok hotel, watching through binoculars as the man who had nearly destroyed his family emerged from the lobby. Blake looked thinner than Devin remembered, his formerly confident posture now hunched and wary, his eyes constantly scanning his surroundings. The irony wasn't lost on Devin. 2 years ago, he had watched Blake from a similar vantage point, tracking his movements as part of a calculated campaign of justice. Now, he was doing the same, but with a different objective: prevention rather than retribution. As Blake hailed a taxi, Devin signaled to his team to follow. The next few hours were spent in careful surveillance as Blake visited a series of increasingly questionable establishments: a document forger, a weapons dealer disguised as a sporting goods store, and finally, a private meeting with a man Devin's local contact identified as a human trafficker known for arranging discreet transportation. By evening, Devin had seen enough. Blake's intentions were clear. He was preparing for something violent and illegal, something that likely involved Vanessa. Whether he planned to harm her or use her in some scheme was unclear, but Devin had no intention of letting the situation progress any further. As Blake returned to his hotel after dark, visibly intoxicated and unsteady, Devin made his move. With 2 team members monitoring the perimeter, he intercepted Blake in the dimly lit hotel corridor. Blake's eyes widened in shock and fear as he recognized Devin. Where did you find me?" "I never lost you," Devin replied coldly. "Not really." Blake backed up against the wall, his hand moving toward his jacket pocket where Devin knew he had purchased a knife earlier that day. "I wouldn't," Devin advised quietly. Blake froze, then let his hand fall to his side. "What do you want? Haven't you done enough? You destroyed my life, turned Vanessa against me, made me Donati's slave. And yet, here you are, planning to what? Harm Vanessa? Use her for some new scheme? Revenge against me?" Blake's expression shifted from fear to bitter hatred. "You think you know everything, don't you? The great Devin Rousseau, always 3 steps ahead." He laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You have no idea what's really happening. None." "Then enlighten me," Devin suggested, his posture relaxed but ready. "Vanessa reached out to me," Blake said, his words slightly slurred from alcohol. 6 weeks ago. Said she needed help. Said she was afraid. Afraid of what? Of you." Blake spat. "She figured out what you did. How you manipulated everything. The gambling debts, Walsh's disbarment, Donati's involvement. All of it orchestrated by you." Devin kept his expression neutral, though inwardly he was reassessing the situation rapidly. "And you're here to do what, exactly? Rescue her?" Blake's laugh was bitter. "Rescue? No. I'm here to make a deal. Information for freedom." "What information?" "Evidence of your methods. Your connections to Donati. The illegal surveillance. Everything I've been documenting for the past 2 years while playing the good little debt slave." Blake's smile was ugly. "Enough to interest federal authorities, I think. Especially given your new government contracts. So that was the play. Not violence against Vanessa, but blackmail against Devon, using Vanessa's new diplomatic position as leverage. And Vanessa? She's part of this plan. Blake hesitated just long enough for Devon to know he was about to lie. Of course. She wants justice as much as I do. Devon nodded slowly, then moved with startling speed. Before Blake could react, Devon had him pinned against the wall, one forearm across his throat. Here's what's going to happen, Devon said softly. You're going to give me every piece of so-called evidence you've collected. Every document, every recording. Then you're going to disappear, not to Jakarta, not back to the States. Somewhere very far away, under a new identity that my people will provide. And why would I do that? Blake gasped around the pressure on his throat. Because the alternative is I contact Donati right now and tell him exactly where to find you. I believe he mentioned something about cement shoes the last time we spoke about you. The fear in Blake's eyes confirmed that the threat was effective. Donati's reputation for dealing with those who crossed him was well known. I'll also transfer $100,000 to an account of your choosing, Devon continued. Enough to start over somewhere new. One chance, Blake. Take it or deal with Donati. 20 minutes later, Devon had everything. Blake's documents, recordings, digital files. Most were exaggerations or outright fabrications, but a few contained enough truth to be potentially problematic if they reached the wrong hands. As Blake prepared to leave with his new documentation and the promise of funds, he paused at the door. She really was afraid of you, you know. Said you were watching her, that you'd never let her move on. Maybe she was right. Devon said nothing, his expression impassive. We're the same, you and I, Blake continued, emboldened by Devon's silence. Different methods, maybe different resources, but the same underneath. Willing to do whatever it takes to get what we want. There's a fundamental difference, Devon replied finally. I protect what's mine. You destroy what was never yours to begin with. After Blake left, headed for a remote part of Malaysia with a new identity and enough money to disappear effectively, Devon contacted Phil. The Blake situation is resolved, he reported. I'm heading to Jakarta as planned. And Vanessa? Phil asked, should we maintain surveillance? Devon considered the question, remembering Blake's parting words. Had Vanessa really been afraid of him? Had his determination to monitor potential threats appeared as something more sinister from her perspective? Maintain normal security procedures for all diplomatic personnel, he decided. Nothing more, nothing less. 3 days later, Devon sat in the security office of the American Embassy in Jakarta, reviewing protective protocols for the upcoming diplomatic conference. His team had established comprehensive safety measures, and Phil had everything running smoothly. As Devon exited a briefing with the regional security officer, he turned a corner and found himself face to face with Vanessa. She stopped abruptly, color draining from her face. Devon, I didn't know you were here. Security consultation, he explained briefly. For the conference. Vanessa nodded, visibly gathering herself. Of course. That makes sense. An awkward silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken history. How's Millie? Vanessa asked finally. Thriving. Top of her class. Building robots now. A genuine smile touched Vanessa's lips. That sounds like her. Another silence. I should go, Devon said, moving to step past her. Wait. Vanessa's voice was quiet but firm. I need to ask you something. Have you been watching me? These past 2 years. Devon met her gaze steadily. I've maintained awareness of potential threats to my family. Nothing more. Blake contacted me, she said, studying his reaction. Said he had evidence you'd been orchestrating everything. That you'd never let either of us move on. And did you believe him? Vanessa hesitated. I don't know what to believe anymore. You were always 3 steps ahead of everyone, Devon. Always in control. She took a deep breath. I just want to know if I'm free. If I can build a life without looking over my shoulder. Devon considered his response carefully. The tactical part of him suggested maintaining ambiguity. Let her uncertainty serve as a deterrent against any future schemes. But another part recognized the exhaustion in her eyes, the genuine desire for resolution. Blake won't be contacting you again, he said finally. He's starting over somewhere new, with resources to stay gone permanently. As for me, My interest has only ever been protecting what's mine. Millie, Howard, my company. He paused. You made your choice 2 years ago, Vanessa. I made peace with that. Relief flickered across her face, followed by something like sadness. But not forgiveness. No, Devin acknowledged quietly. Not that. Vanessa nodded, accepting this truth. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for the affair, but for everything that came after. The schemes with Howard's will, the lies. She met his eyes directly. You were right to do what you did. To protect your family. Devin said nothing, his expression unchanged. After a moment, Vanessa stepped aside. I should let you get back to work. Thank you for the closure. As she walked away, Devin felt a complex mix of emotions. The lingering anger at her betrayal, but also a certain acknowledgement of her apparent growth. The Vanessa of 2 years ago would never have admitted he was right, would never have taken responsibility so directly. But acknowledgement was not forgiveness. Understanding was not trust restored. Some bridges, once burned, remained ashes, a reminder of what was lost and what could never be rebuilt. That evening, as Devin finalized the security protocols for the conference, he received a message from Howard. Hope the Jakarta setup is going well. Millie's science project won first place. She says to tell you she'll call after dinner to describe every detail. We miss you. Come home safe. Attached was a photo of Millie grinning proudly beside her robotics project, Howard's arm around her shoulders. Devin smiled, feeling the tension of the past weeks finally release. This was what mattered, the family he had protected, the future he had secured. No matter what ghosts from the past might surface, this truth remained constant. As for Vanessa, Blake, and the others who had betrayed his trust, they would carry the consequences of their actions forever, just as he would carry the lessons learned from their betrayal. The difference was, he had emerged stronger, while they remained defined by their failures. In protecting what was his, Devin had discovered who he truly was. Not just a man who never forgot or forgave betrayal, but a man who turned even the darkest experiences into foundations for a stronger future. That was a victory no one could take from him. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.